income earners on up, every American will be checked. Thousands more IRS bureaucrats will be hired for their new surveillance program with authority to monitor every transaction you make. Every account transaction would be traced and reported to the federal government, edging us closer and closer to a communist-controlled police state. Republicans are unified in our fight against this new surveillance program. My friend and ranking member Kevin Brady led the charge to stop this early on, but not a single Democrat stood up for Americans' financial privacy.
I yield an additional 15 seconds.
Thank you. First, things are reported and monitored, and then they're controlled. We cannot let Democrats push us down this dangerous and slippery slope. I yield back.
Texas yields back. The gentlewoman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, oh my God, can somebody, please, I beg of you on the other side, can somebody please disassociate yourself or condemn the statement by the former president who said today that the insurrection took place on November 3rd. All my colleagues were elected on November 3rd as well. If you believe that that date, that election day was an insurrection, then your election results are illegitimate. Can somebody please, for the sake of our democracy, say that what was said by the former president is wrong? Please, I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the representative from Indiana.
Gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
I, like my colleagues, today rise in opposition to the previous question so that we can immediately consider H.R. 5586, prohibiting IRS Financial Surveillance Act. Mr. Speaker, Hoosiers are outraged, and my friends across the aisle would have you believe that it is just the Hoosier financial institutions that are outraged at having to hand over the personal account information of their customers. But it is, in fact, those account owners that are outraged at the notion that my friends across the aisle would build an apparatus to surveil and snoop in their personal bank accounts. Now, their horror only grows as I answer questions for them. First, they ask, surely this must only apply to the super rich and not to me. But I reply, no. It applies to you if you spend just over $200 a week. Then they'll ask, surely this must only apply to those that are suspected of a crime. And I say, no. It's collection on every account, irrespective of whether there's a suspected crime or tax evasion afoot. And then, of course, they'll ask me, surely the IRS has a very good track record of keeping this data safe. And I have to reply, no. The track record, in fact, indicates the opposite. The IRS has a terrible track record of keeping this data safe against the intrusion of actors from around the world and right here at home. And then they say, well, surely the IRS has a good track record of not mobilizing this data for political purposes. And yet again, I have to say no. In fact, the evidence indicates the IRS has mobilized this data for their own political purposes and for the political purposes across the aisle. My friends, this is horrifying. This surveillance state that is trying to be built. Hoosiers understand what's being asked of them. Trillions of dollars are being proposed to be spent, and now they're being asked to give up their personal information from their personal bank accounts to foot that bill for my colleagues across the aisle. I hope this stops here, and with that, I yield back.
From Indiana yields back.
Reserve.
The gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from
Speaker, I don't know if this microphone is working because I'm not sure my colleagues can hear me when I have asked them over and over again. Can you please disassociate yourself from the former president's statement today? It is important. But, you know, it is on topic. And by the way, what the gentleman just talked about, you know, has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. It's amazing that nobody wants to talk about what's on the floor today. But my constituents, when they talk to me, you know what they're fearful about? They're fearful about losing our democracy in their lifetime. And the inability or the unwillingness of my friends on the other side to be able to disassociate themselves with a statement by the former president, which today he said the election on November 3rd was somehow the insurrection, is stunning to me. He is tearing this country apart, and the silence and the indifference on the other side is aiding him in his quest to do that. I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my good friend and representative from Indiana.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose the previous question. If we defeat the previous question, Republicans will amend the rule to include H.R. 5586, the Prohibiting IRS Financial Surveillance Act, legislation to prevent the IRS from snooping into Americans' personal financial accounts. Under President Biden and congressional Democrats' policies, American families continue to be squeezed by inflation at the gas pump, at the grocery store, and in their monthly energy bills. But this inflation isn't enough for them. Now they want to monitor the average American's bank account. As part of Democrats' misguided tax and spending spree, they've proposed new reporting requirements from financial institutions to the IRS regarding private account information. This vast government overreach would turn financial institutions into my district into local outposts of the IRS, all with the sole purpose of reporting Hoosiers' personal financial account information back to the government. Make no mistake, this will capture virtually every American who will be subject to increased levels of IRS intrusion in their daily lives. The IRS has already been challenged by leaks of thousands of documents, including sensitive taxpayer information. The collection of additional data would only exacerbate this problem and subject many Americans to the potential exposure of their personal information. Let's not forget that under the Obama administration, the IRS systematically targeted certain groups applying for tax-exempt status simply because of their political affiliation. I hope that we can defeat the previous question to protect the privacy of all Americans and to ensure that the IRS won't be surveilling every financial transaction. I urge my colleagues to oppose the previous question, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from Indiana yields back. The gentlewoman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close.
I am as well. So,
Thank you.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The majority has chosen to turn the committee into a vehicle to push their own narrative, and it is clearly more interested in pursuing a partisan agenda to politicize January 6th rather than conducting a legitimate, good faith investigation into the security failures leading up to that day. As my colleague from Pennsylvania pointed out, where is the legitimate legislative purpose? The members across the aisle have yet to address what kind of legitimate legislative purposes could, might, or even possibly come out of the commission investigation. A lawful subpoena, according to the Supreme Court, needs to serve a legitimate legislative purpose. The majority leader used the words like oversight, the American people need to understand, and hold perpetrators accountable. These statements do not qualify as a legitimate legislative purpose. This is nothing more than an attempt by the Democrats to distract from the very real issues facing Americans every day. I look forward to getting back to the real work of solving the supply chain issues, reclaiming American energy production, and empowering U.S. citizens to live their lives without government interference or surveillance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I oppose the previous question, the rule, and the underlying legislation, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Minnesota yields the balance of her time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Speaker.
Gentleman has 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I yield myself the balance of the time. Mr. Speaker, I can't adequately express the outrage I feel about what happened in this institution on January 6th. It was not only an attack on this building, it was an attack on our democracy. And I'll tell you, if we don't have our democracy intact, you're not going to fix the supply chain issues or the energy issues or any other issues. But our democracy is in peril. It was attacked on January 6th. And Mr. Speaker, I'm the chairman of the Rules Committee, so I understand what the rules of the House are. And so I cannot say what I really feel about what went on in this chamber today with this debate. I'm disgusted, to be quite honest with you. We are trying to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th, and many on the other side have done everything they could to frustrate that effort. And now we have somebody who doesn't want to comply with a subpoena, and we are saying, we're going to put some force behind that because we need to be able to do our oversight. We need to get to the truth. and my friends is trying to frustrate that. And then today, former President Trump issues a statement saying Insurrection Day took place on November 3rd. That was Election Day, when we were all elected. That's what he thought? That's what he thinks was an insurrection? And January 6th was just a protest. I mean, we were all here that day. We saw the violence. People lost their lives that day. People were wounded that day. People were traumatized by that day. And again, it was not just an attack on this building and the people who work here. It was an attack on our democracy. And my friends on the other side of the aisle can't even muster the courage to say that the former president was wrong in his statement. That is what fear looks like. That is what fear of Donald Trump looks like. It is so sad that a once great party has come to this. You know, I said it earlier before, I mean, members come and go. And I know people are all worried about the latest polls and where our base is and what political implications will come from this or that. But at the end of the day, you got to be worried about your legacy, about what your children and grandchildren think. So, Mr. Speaker, please, I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the previous question, and I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The gentleman from Massachusetts yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate has expired. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The previous question is ordered. Gentlelady from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the ayes and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. For what purposes, gentlemen from Pennsylvania, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Representative McMorris Rogers pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Representative McMorris Rogers will vote no on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
The member designated by Congresswoman Grace Meng pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Meng will vote yea on ordering the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Khanna of California pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Mr. Khanna will vote yea on motion to move the previous question on H-Res 727.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition? Did she hear me? Okay. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
As a member designated by Mr. Rush, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on the previous question. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Cooper, I inform the House that Mr. Cooper will vote yes on the previous question. As a member designated by Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H Resolution 727.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Wasserman Schultz, I inform the House that Mrs. Wasserman Schultz will vote yay on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Kirkpatrick, I inform the House that Ms. Kirkpatrick will vote yes on the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Burgess of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Burgess will vote nay on the previous question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin, I inform the House that Ms. Moore will vote yes on ordering the previous question. Hello.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota seek recognition?
As the member designated by Ms. Rashida Tlaib, I inform the House that Ms. Tlaib will vote yes on the previous question.
Okay. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts seek recognition?
As the member designated by the Honorable Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts, I inform the House that Mr. Lynch will vote yes on the previous question.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Georgia seek recognition?
As the member designated by Mr. Jody Heiss from Georgia, I inform the House that Mr. Heiss will vote no on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, as the member designated by Ms. Sylvia Garcia, I inform the House that Ms. Garcia will vote yes on the previous question. One more. As the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albio Series, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on the previous question. And as the member designated by Mr. Donald Payne, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Ms. Alma Adams, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on the previous question, and as the member designated by Mr. DeFazio, I inform the House that Mr. DeFazio will vote yes on the previous question.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Salazar of the state of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote nay on the previous question.
Gentleman from New Jersey rise. On this vote, the yeas are 221, the nays are 206. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota rise?
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 15-minute vote. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Tlaib, I inform the House that Ms. Tlaib will vote yes on House Resolution 727.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Albio's series, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on HRes 727. And as the member designated by Mr. Donald Payne, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yes on HRes 727.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Burgess of Texas, I inform the House that Mr. Burgess will vote no on the rule. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
As the member designated by Congresswoman Grace Meng, pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Meng will vote yea on HRes 727.
What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Representative McMorris Rogers, pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Representative McMorris Rogers will vote no on HRes 727.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Sylvia Garcia, I inform the House that Ms. Garcia will vote yes on HRes 727. And as the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on HRes 727.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Georgia rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Jody Heiss from Georgia, I inform the House that Mr. Heiss will vote no on the rule. Is it on the rule? On HR 727.
Illinois. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Rush, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on HRes 727.
This is the gentleman from New York rise.
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, it's my turn? Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Khanna of California pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Khanna will vote aye on HRES 727.
What purpose is the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, I inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on HRES 727.
What purpose is the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Wasserman Schultz, I inform the House that Mrs. Wasserman Schultz will vote yay on HRES 727.
What purpose is the gentleman from Arizona rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Kirkpatrick, I inform the House that Ms. Kirkpatrick will vote yes on HRES 727. And as the member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on HRES 727.
What purpose is the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Lawson, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H Resolution 727.
What purpose is the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
As the member designated by Mr. Cooper, I inform the House that Mr. Cooper will vote yes on HRES 727. And as the member designated by Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on HRES 727.
What purpose is the gentleman from Virginia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin, I inform the House Ms. Moore will vote yes on HRES 727.
For what purpose is the gentlelady from Connecticut rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on HRES 727.
what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Chair, as the member designated by the Honorable Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts pursuant to HRes 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lynch will vote yes on HRes 727.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Alma Adams, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on HRes 727. And as the member designated by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon, I inform the House that Mr. DeFazio will vote yes on HRes 727.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Salazar, the state of Florida, inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote nay on the rule.
The nays are 205. The resolution is adopted, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, by the direction of the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, I call up House Report 117-152.
The clerk will report the title.
House Calendar number 39, House Report number 117-152, report to accompany resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find Stephen K. Bannon in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with a subpoena duly issued by the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
Pursuant to House Resolution 727, the report is considered read. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol, I call up House Resolution 730 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 730, resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find Stephen K. Bannon in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with a subpoena duly issued by the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol.
Pursuant to House Resolution 727, The resolution is considered read and shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided among and controlled by the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, the gentlelady from Wyoming, Ms. Cheney, and an opponent or their respective designees. The gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, the gentlewoman from Ms. Cheney, and the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Banks, each will control 20 minutes, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection, so ordered.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, since Speaker Pelosi asked me to chair the January 6th Select Committee, I spent a lot of time thinking about the importance of what we are doing, the weight of it, the urgency. We need to give the American people answers about what happened. There needs to be swift accountability. But there are longer-term considerations too, Madam Speaker. I'm a grandfather, and when I talk to my grandkids about that horrific attack on our democracy on January 6th, my mind jumps ahead to the future in store for them. Questions about whether American democracy, as we know it now, will remain strong, whether it will withstand future tests. That's got to be the legacy of this committee's work. To be sure, we're going to answer questions about what happened on that day. But we also need to draw a roadmap for making sure our democracy remains strong tomorrow. We'll work backward at what happened and try to explain how and why the insurrection came about. But we'll also look forward and generate recommendations for legislative policy and process changes that will help ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. And when we get to the end of this process and look back, we're going to ask ourselves, did we do everything in our power to uncover every fact? Did we use the tools at our disposal to get a full accounting, or did we let someone stand in our way without facing consequences? Did we learn what we needed to know for Congress to forge legislation to help ensure we never experience another January 6th again? That's why we are taking up this resolution today, citing Steve Bannon with criminal contempt and referring him for prosecution by the Justice Department. We didn't choose to be here. This isn't about punishing Steve Bannon. The Select Committee would prefer and frankly expect all witnesses to fully cooperate. But Steve Bannon has led us down this path by refusing to cooperate in any way with our investigation. We believe Mr. Bannon has information valuable to our probe. He was deeply involved in the so-called Stop the Steal campaign. He was reportedly in a war room meeting the day before the riot and had been pressuring the former president to try to stop the counting of the Electoral College ballots. He himself warned that all hell would break loose on January 6th. We believe he can help inform our inquiry as to how the riot came together and what it was intended to achieve. He's clearly an important witness. So we subpoenaed him, and unlike other witnesses who have engaged and worked with our team to find a way to cooperate, Mr. Bannon told us he wouldn't comply because the former president told him not to. He hid behind vague and baseless claims of privilege. That's just not acceptable. The Select Committee told Mr. Bannon several times that he would face the consequences if he didn't change course. Well, he didn't change course, and his actions have brought us to this point. Madam Speaker, we need to make it clear that no person is above the law. We need to take a stand for the integrity of the Select Committee's investigation and for the integrity of this body. What sort of precedent would it set for the House of Representatives if we allow a witness to ignore us flat out without facing any kind of consequences? What message would it send to other witnesses in our investigation? I'm not willing to find out. I'm not willing to get to the end of the Select Committee's work and look back wishing we had done more to uncover all the facts, not when we know what's on the line, when we know that our democracy isn't yet out of danger, when we know that the forces that tried to overturn the election persist in their assault on the rule of law. Our investigation is going forward. We're hearing from witnesses, reviewing documents, analyzing data. Mr. Bannon stands alone in his defiance, and we will not stand for it. We will not allow anyone to derail our work because our work is too important, helping ensure that the future of American democracy is strong and secure. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
Madam Speaker, a year ago today, the election was still a couple of weeks off. We knew it would be a tight race, but most of us did not anticipate that President Trump, or any president, frankly, would ever simply reject the outcome of the vote. President Trump had the right to challenge the outcome in our state and federal courts, which have an appropriate and constitutional role in resolving election claims. But what he did thereafter has no precedent in our history. He rejected the court's rulings in dozens of cases, including the rulings of judges President Trump himself appointed. He rejected what his own Department of Justice officials told him over and over again, that they found no evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to overcome the election. He rejected the conclusions of both the Department of Justice and the intelligence community that the Dominion voting machines had not secretly changed the election outcome. President Trump had no factual or constitutional basis for his claims, and the lawyers he found who would carry his false claims forward have paid the consequences. Rudy Giuliani's license to practice law has been suspended, and Sidney Powell has been sanctioned by a federal judge. But Donald Trump persisted, attempting through every manner he could imagine to try to overturn the outcome of the election. And we all saw what happened. The people who attacked this building have told us on video, on social media, and now before the federal courts exactly what motivated them. They believed what Donald Trump told them, that the election was stolen and that they needed to take action. Today, Madam Speaker, we are here to address one witness, Mr. Steve Bannon. I urge all Americans to watch what Mr. Bannon said on his podcast on January 5th and 6th. It is shocking and indefensible. He said all hell is going to break loose. He said, quote, "We are coming in right over the target. This is the point of attack we have always wanted." Madam Speaker, there are people in this chamber right now who were evacuated with me and with the rest of us on that day during that attack. People who now seem to have forgotten the danger of the moment, the assault on the Constitution, the assault on our Congress. People who you will hear argue that there is simply no legislative purpose for this committee, for this investigation, or for this subpoena. In fact, there is no doubt that Mr. Bannon knows far more than what he said on the video. There is no doubt that all hell did break loose. Just ask the scores of brave police officers who were injured that day protecting all of us. The American people deserve to hear his testimony. Let me give you just 4 examples of the legislative purpose of this investigation. First, the plot we are investigating, involving Mr. Eastman, Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Bannon, President Trump, and many others. Their plot attempted to halt or delay our count of electoral votes and reverse the outcome of the 2020 election. The 1887 Electoral Count Act is directly at issue. and our investigation will lead to recommendations to amend or reform that act. Second, while the attack was underway, President Trump knew it was happening. Indeed, he may have been watching it all unfold on television, and yet he took no immediate action to stop it. This appears to be a supreme dereliction of duty by President Trump, and we are evaluating whether our criminal laws should be enhanced to supply additional and more severe consequences for this type of behavior. Third, we know from our investigation to date that President Trump was pressuring the Department of Justice in late December 2020 to support his false claims that the election was stolen. Several brave and honorable Trump appointees at the department flatly refused to go along with this fraud and threatened to resign. We are evaluating what, if any, additional laws may be required to prevent a future president from succeeding in any such effort. Fourth, we know that President Trump made efforts to persuade state election officials to, quote, find votes, to change the election outcome in his favor. We are evaluating whether the criminal laws of the United States should be enhanced to make the penalty for this type of behavior even more severe, and if so, in what manner. Mr. Bannon's own public statements make clear he knew what was going to happen before it did, and thus he must have been aware of and may well have been involved in the planning of everything that played out on that day. The American people deserve to know what he knew and what he did. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Indiana.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 3 months ago, for the first time in the history of Congress, Speaker Pelosi vetoed Jim Jordan and I from serving on the Select Committee to investigate January 6th. Not all firsts are worth celebrating. It was a shameful and divisive decision with real consequences. Today, because of that decision, there is no committee conducting a legitimate investigation into January 6th. Congress is prohibited from conducting criminal investigations, period. But that's exactly what the Select Committee is doing, conducting an illicit criminal investigation into American citizens. Steve Bannon was a private citizen before, after, and during January 6th. So why is the Select Committee interested in Steve Bannon? It's simple. He is a Democrat Party boogeyman. The Select Committee despises Steve Bannon's politics, so they're abusing their power to put him in jail. The committee explained it's seeking documents from Mr. Bannon because he helped, quote, construct and participated in the permitted and legal Stop the Steal rally. To date, the Select Committee has subpoenaed 11 other private citizens for organizing the Stop the Steal rally. Here, in the land of the free, 12 American citizens are under congressional investigation for the sole crime of planning a legal political protest. Never in the history of Congress has a committee or a political party stooped so low. Congress has no authority to conduct criminal investigations. Congress can only issue subpoenas that serve a legislative purpose. The question that the committee must answer is, why are they seeking information about a permitted political rally? What legislative purpose does that serve? Is the committee considering laws to limit Americans' right to political protest? It's clear that the Select Committee doesn't give a lick about Congress's subpoena authority. Does the committee share the same disdain for the First Amendment? I wouldn't put it past them. As we all know, the DOJ has a highly active criminal investigation into the January 6th attack. They've made something like 600 arrests. As I said, very active, even hyperactive, compared to the Biden DOJ's typical reaction to political violence. But the Department of Justice's investigation isn't comprehensive. There are still questions that only Congress can answer. Congress still has a role to play. But the Select Committee has completely abandoned that role. Why else does the Select Committee want to hear from Mr. Bannon? Because on January 5th, Mr. Bannon warned that, quote, all hell was going to break loose tomorrow. So according to the Select Committee, no person could have predicted that violence might occur that day. According to the committee, that Mr. Bannon warned of violence on the 5th is proof that Mr. Bannon had, quote, foreknowledge of the attack on the 6th. Never mind that the FBI found that the attack wasn't coordinated. Never mind that the Capitol Police received actionable intelligence about a potential violence occurring weeks before the 6th. Never mind that every member of Congress, every single DC resident, every American with internet access knew that violence was a possibility on January 6th. The question the committee should be asking is this: how did the United States Capitol Police, the DC Metropolitan Police, and the FBI all have no clue that, quote, all hell was going to break loose? Steve Bannon, a private citizen, knew. So why didn't the Capitol Police have enough riot shields? Why did it take multiple hours to deploy the National Guard? These are worthwhile questions, and Congress has a duty to answer them. Because January 6th was an enormous intelligence failure. There was a breakdown in security, a breakdown that was repeated on Good Friday when Officer Billy Evans was brutally murdered. The issues that plagued the Capitol Police on January 6th have not been fixed. In fact, according to a Capitol Police whistleblower, the officers most responsible for the intelligence failure on the 6th were promoted by Speaker Pelosi's team. To be clear, the Select Committee is engaged in an unconstitutional political investigation, a sham investigation conducted by a sham committee that refuses to answer real questions about what happened on January 6th. The Capitol was attacked, and instead of figuring out what went wrong, the committee launched its own attack on Congress's norms. The Select Committee's politicization of January 6th cuts both ways. The committee's inaction has made the Capitol less secure, and the committee's actions have further separated Congress from its constitutional roles. The American people and the United States Capitol Police deserve a real investigation into the 6th, and the Select Committee has abandoned them. I urge all of my colleagues to make the moral vote, do the right thing. I urge you to vote for the rule of law, for the institution of Congress, and against the Select Committee's dangerous abuse of Congress's oversight authority. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Mississippi.
Madam Speaker, I heard the Speaker opposing this amendment. We're not seeking actually information from Mr. Bannon because of his opinions. We issued the subpoena because we believe he's knowledge of relevant facts that we need to discover. We're not violating anything, and certainly not Mr. Bannon's amendment rights. The only violation we can talk about is the violation of this building on January 6th. And Mr. Bannon's claim that the election was stolen helped foment that attack. Investigating that is also part of our charter. Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to correct the record. The gentleman from Indiana asserted that the FBI has found there was no coordination. That's just simply not true. The gentleman also said that he is not on the committee. He noted that the Speaker had determined that he wouldn't be on the committee. So I would like to introduce for the record a number of letters the gentleman from Indiana has been sending to federal agencies, dated September 16th, 2021, for example, signing his name as the ranking member of the committee. He's just informed the House that he's not on and that he, in fact, is not on. I'd like to introduce those for the record. And now, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield to Representative Lofgren.
Time.
I would like to yield 3 minutes, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would note that the gentleman from Indiana is incorrect. We are not pursuing a law enforcement investigation. Only the DOJ can do that. What we are doing is taking the steps that are provided for under the congressional contempt statute that has existed for many decades, because the Select Committee's charge is to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. Who planned it? Who paid for it? What was the intent? And what legislative steps can we recommend to remove future threats to our Constitution? To do that, we need information, both documents and testimony, and to get that, we issue subpoenas. Now, what is a subpoena? Is it just a suggestion, a mere request, an encouragement to testify? Nope. A subpoena is a writ issued by a government agency, in this case the Congress, to compel testimony or production of evidence. When you get a subpoena, the law requires you to comply. If you think there may be some valid reason that excuses you from telling the truth under oath, you have to come in and make your case to the committee. Steve Bannon is the only person who's outright refused to engage with the committee. He thinks that if he simply obstructs Congress by not showing up, he'll escape the consequences. But as Theodore Roosevelt said, no man is above the law and no man is below the law. If you get a subpoena, you can't hide behind vague, immaterial claims of privilege. The cases make it clear. Judicial Watch, Nixon versus GSA, the McGahn case, executive privilege is limited to immediate White House advisors on government policy. Bannon's a private citizen. His extravagant claims can't shield his conversations and plotting with other private citizens. His status, according to the cases, doesn't get executive privilege protection. He has no absolute immunity. America, what would happen if you received a subpoena from Congress or a court? Do you think you could get away with just saying, go fly a kite? You'd be held accountable. And so should Mr. Bannon be held to account for defying the law regarding this subpoena. To defend the rule of law, we must vote yes on this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time to the gentlelady.
Gentleman from Indiana.
Madam Speaker, no one has said that the Select Committee doesn't have a legislative purpose. Let's be very clear. There's important work that, frankly, we wish they were doing, like answering why this campus was left unprotected and what we are doing to keep it from happening again. That hasn't happened yet. What we are saying is that the subpoenas that have so far been issued do not ask for information that would meet any legitimate legislative purpose. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield to my colleague from the great state of Illinois, Mr. Davis.
For what amount of time, please?
As much time as he may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my friend and colleague from Indiana, Mr. Banks. I can tell you when I got elected to serve in this body almost 9 years ago, I didn't expect to be standing here today to talk about such an important issue. I spent 16 years as a congressional staffer working for a member of Congress who I looked up to and who respected this institution for what it was and what it meant to our country. And when I came to Congress to serve with him, I had that utmost respect for this institution at the same time. That's why I wanted to be part of the House Administration Committee, because I wanted to make this Congress and this House work better, act in a much more bipartisan manner, make sure that we protect those who are on this campus, but also at the same time protect those who protect us. And Madam Speaker, we are now months and months post January 6th. My many conversations with U.S. Capitol Police officers and those who work on this campus, they have the same concerns I have. The question they ask is, why were we so unprotected on January 6th? And what has changed since then? Getting to the bottom of those questions should be the top priority for all of us in this House. There are serious security vulnerabilities that have not been addressed by this House in 11 months after January 6th, and this is what the majority has decided to spend its time on. Holding a private citizen who wasn't even part of the administration at the time in contempt for refusing to comply with House Democrats' subpoenas. This is after more than 600 people have been arrested for their role in the tragedies we saw on January 6th. And when I get the article, I would like to submit for the record, Madam Speaker, a Reuters article that talks about senior officials stating at the FBI that there was no organized effort to overthrow the government on January 6th. So I will submit it once I get a copy of that. I did not bring it with me. But our job, again, is to secure this Capitol. We've never seen a breach like the one that we saw that day. And it's our responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again. But that hasn't been done under the leadership of this House. We've had 2 independent reports regarding January 6th. One bipartisan report in the Senate and another one commissioned by the Speaker herself. And that came out in March. These have never been acted on. But this is what the Select Committee has been working on. The Capitol Police IG has released 7 reports related to January 6th, making recommendations on what is needed to secure this Capitol. To my disappointment, the majority has not acted in a meaningful way to ensure all 103 IG findings are implemented. These reports have all told us what the problems are and the recommendations on how to fix them. But Congress, us, have failed to even debate these changes, let alone act on them. We know massive changes to intel, perimeter protection, training, leadership structure, decision-making processes, and many, many more are needed, but neither the Select Committee nor the Committee on House Administration seem at all interested in ensuring these changes are made. The Committee on House Administration, which has oversight of security, hasn't held a single hearing since August 5th, with no upcoming hearings scheduled according to the majority's website. And the Select Committee, right now, as we see, is just purely focused on political subpoenas. And without objection, I'd like to introduce these articles into the record, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Additionally, a number of questions from that day still remain unanswered. I'm still waiting for the Speaker of the House to answer a letter I sent her back in February that asked why the National Guard requests by then Police Chief Son were denied. And why was the Speaker's office and the Speaker involved in eventually approving the request? Why the House Sergeant at Arms has refused to comply with preservation and production requests from my office. And we have many, many more questions about why the Capitol was so unprepared that day. Our top priority should be ensuring our Capitol is never as vulnerable as it was on January 6th. But this majority has done absolutely nothing to make the security changes needed to make this Capitol safer. Madam Speaker, we must do better. We have not fixed the institutional problems with our security apparatus that led to the lack of preparation, the danger that our brave officers were put in on that day and any other possible day like that in the future. That's a failure of leadership in this institution. We must fix the problems that led to the terrible security posture here. And I will tell you, after witnessing what we saw in a few different days and security postures that this House was put into a couple of other days since January 6th. And I urge you to talk to the brave officers that stand around these buildings and protect all of us every day. Ask them the same question I do. Ask them if we have put them in a better position than they were in on January 5th. And the answer out of every single officer I ask that question to is no. What is stopping this House from fixing the problems? It's a lack of will. It's a lack of focusing on the true issues that led for them to be put in a dangerous spot on January 5th. Instead, we're talking politics. It's wrong, and we must do better. I've said time and time again, and I stand willing to work with my Democrat colleagues to make this House, this Capitol, safer for everyone. Instead, it's all about political points like the one being scored today. Disappointed, you can tell. My frustration is going to continue to boil over until we're in a position to fix the problems that I've laid out and that we know exist. I yield back.
Gentleman from Mississippi.
Madam Speaker, in response to gentleman from Illinois' statement, the first hearing of the Select Committee, we actually held and interviewed 4 officers who put their lives on line defending all of us who work here in this body. So I assure you, my directions to the committee have always been, we'll look at all the facts and circumstances surrounding what occurred. We're genuinely interested in getting to the facts. We're working to get the answers, and that's why we are on the floor today, to get answers from Steve Bannon about what he knew, what he did leading up to January 6th. Also, the gentleman from Indiana, I'm glad he finally agreed that the Select Committee has a legitimate legislative purpose. And that's why we're here today pursuing that legislative purpose. So I'm happy that the record will reflect his comments. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Murphy, a valued member of the Select Committee.
For 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this resolution to refer Stephen Bannon to the Department of Justice for prosecution for contempt of Congress. You know, it didn't have to be this way. Mr. Bannon, a self-professed patriot, could have done the patriotic thing and cooperated with our bipartisan committee. If Mr. Bannon is proud of the role he played in connection with January 6th, he should be eager to tell his side of the story. And instead, he's acting like a man who has something to hide. Our committee seeks only the truth. That is our legal charge and our moral obligation. We cannot let any individual impede our inquiry, and we will not tolerate Mr. Bannon's evasion. And why must we be so unrelenting in our pursuit of truth? Because on January 6th, the greatest nation on earth came under attack. And this attack wasn't carried out by officials in Beijing, Moscow, or Tehran, or foreign terrorists even. It was an attack conducted by our fellow citizens, regular Americans who were radicalized because they believed outrageous lies fed to them by other Americans in positions of power and influence. The attack was launched against the seat and symbol of our republic. It was designed to disrupt the certification of the presidential election results, to defy the will of the voters. This was no peaceful protest in a proud American tradition. It was violent and vicious. Members of the mob wielded weapons. They called for the death of the vice president. They hunted members of Congress. They caused severe harm to law enforcement officers. And the real disservice to the police comes from those who want to whitewash the violence of January 6th and pretend that the riot of that day was anything short of the violent attack it was, aimed at derailing the peaceful transfer of power. America's not just a place, it's an idea. And on January 6th, there was an attack on the very idea of America. And I believe that patriots of all political stripes should want to protect our capital, this country, and her Constitution. Our committee will make a full accounting of what happened and will make recommendations to ensure it never happens again.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the Vice Chair for yielding.
Like many of my colleagues, I was right here on the House floor when the violent mob attacked our Capitol. I saw those doors shaking, nearly overrun with rioters attempting to enter. I saw my colleagues shed their jackets and roll up their sleeves, preparing for the eventuality. And I saw Capitol Police acting quickly and thoughtfully to conduct a successful evacuation of members from this chamber. Their actions undoubtedly saved lives. What we didn't know at the time was that on the steps of the Capitol were the Capitol and the Metro PD officers engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Officer Michael Fanone told us he was grabbed, beaten, and tased, all while being called a traitor to this country. This is what officers dealt with to defend our democracy. Some lost their lives. Many are still living with both the physical wounds and the trauma that they suffered that day. This is what our officers dealt with to defend democracy. Officer Harry Dunn told us more than 6 months later, January 6th, still isn't over for me. These officers are heroes. I want to thank the chair and the vice chair for their leadership in making our first hearing directly from those heroes in their own words. We wanted to hear and make sure that all of our colleagues in this country heard firsthand what we experienced on the ground that day. We asked them to explain the violence they had to endure to protect our democratic process. And in return, they made one simple request: to get to the bottom of this. They want answers, and quite frankly, they deserve answers. So far, both the Metro PD and the Capitol Police have been excellent allies in this investigation. They've cooperated, shared their stories and expertise, and provided us with key evidence and accounts of the violence they endured that day. And we owe it to them to see this investigation through. The vote we take today is a crucial step toward removing a roadblock in our investigation. We owe it to every officer who put their life on the line that day and every day to protect us here in the Capitol. We owe them answers, and this committee intends to get to those answers by all means necessary. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this resolution. Thank you. I yield back to the
Gentleman from Indiana.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kinzinger, an Iraq and Afghanistan Air Force veteran and a lieutenant colonel in the Air National Guard.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Well, I thank the chairman for yielding. Let me just say first, Madam Speaker, as a Republican, don't let my side use the security posture as the straw man argument in this. The reality is that's the equivalent of blaming the victim of a crime for the crime. And while it is important, that's not what we're here to talk about today. Madam Speaker, voting on a criminal contempt resolution is not the position we hoped to be in, but Steve Bannon went out of his way to earn this resolution before us, and now we must approve it. Mr. Bannon's willful disregard for the Select Committee's subpoena demonstrates his utter contempt for the American people's right to know how the attacks on January 6 came about. He has advanced a ludicrous legal argument in support of his decision not to cooperate or comply, a decision that defies the rule of law and rejects the will of the American people. Mr. Bannon's reported actions put him near the center of the investigation into the events surrounding January 6th. His own words strongly suggest that the actions of the mob that stormed the Capitol and invaded this very chamber came as no surprise to him. He and a few others were by all accounts involved in planning that day's events and encouraged by those who attacked the Capitol, our officers, and our democracy. I have no doubt that Mr. Bannon's scorn for our subpoena is real, but no one, and I repeat, no one, is above the law, and we need to hear from him. As the Select Committee's contempt report states, it was Mr. Bannon who on January 5th predicted with chilling accuracy, quote, "all hell is going to break loose tomorrow." On his radio show that day, he stated, quote, "it's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen. Okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. All I can say is strap in. You made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day. So strap in. Let's get ready." And it was Mr. Bannon who is recorded as saying, quote, "it's all converging, and now we're on the point of attack tomorrow." Mr. Bannon said these things publicly as a private citizen, someone deeply involved with Stop the Steal movement, and he said them nearly 3 years after leaving his job at the White House. Mr. Bannon was also reportedly among the small group of Trump confidants assembled at the Willard Hotel to discuss plans to stop or delay the January 6th count. Is it any wonder that the Select Committee needs to hear from him, that we want to see related materials that he has? Furthermore, does anyone really believe Mr. Bannon's actions are covered by a blanket, no questions asked claim of executive privilege, one the former president has never actually made? Madam Speaker, Steve Bannon is a key witness to the Select Committee's probe. He has yet to say or produce anything in response to the subpoena, and his assertion of executive privilege is far-fetched in the extreme and not his to make. I urge my colleagues to join me to support the contempt resolution, and I yield back.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the distinguished gentlelady from Wyoming, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, Donald Trump said the insurrection took place on November 3rd. No, Mr. Trump, I'm sorry. That's what we call an election in America, an election that was validated by more than 60 federal and state courts, including before 8 judges nominated to the bench by President Trump himself, and all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, all of them rejecting every claim of electoral fraud and corruption that was advanced. We know an insurrection when we see one in this body because we lived through one. Under the banner of this continuing and deranged big lie, the Stop the Steal movement brought down a violent insurrection against this Congress and an attempted coup against Vice President Mike Pence. They interrupted the counting of electoral college votes for the first time in American history. They caused the worst attack on Congress since the War of 1812, and they injured and wounded more than 140 police officers, Capitol officers, Metropolitan Police Department officers, and others, breaking their noses, breaking their necks, breaking their vertebrae, breaking their arms, breaking their legs, breaking their hearts and their spirits. We are investigating the attack on American democracy because we are Americans. We are investigating the attack on Congress by domestic enemies of our Constitution because we are sworn to do so by our oaths of office. But now, the big lie has become a big cover-up. After being impeached twice by the House, after losing in 61 different courts, after seeing a 57-43 vote against him in the U.S. Senate in the most sweeping bipartisan Senate presidential conviction vote in American history, Trump now tries to get his followers like Steve Bannon not to testify here and not to turn over evidence that they have about this vicious assault on American democracy. In America, when you are subpoenaed to testify in court or in Congress, you show up, period. You can invoke your Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination to specific questions if you think you committed a crime. You can claim executive privilege to specific questions if you think you're President of the United States. But you cannot blow off a subpoena in America. You cannot sit on your couch and defy the people's representatives in Congress. So we must enforce the rule of law here, my colleagues. We must do it. If you act deliberately, with sneering, cavalier contempt for the American people and their representatives, we will hold you in contempt. We will get to the truth of the violent assault on America. I yield back.
Gentleman from Indiana.
Speaker, you don't have to look far to realize the absurdity of what's happening in Congress today. In fact, Politico just reported moments ago that the Capitol Police whistleblower is telling Politico that they have not been contacted by the January 6th Select Committee, the Capitol Police whistleblower. He said that the United States Capitol Police deserves more scrutiny than it's gotten so far, and that he would talk to investigators if they reach out to him. And the Select Committee has not reached out to the Capitol Police whistleblower. Yet here we are today focused on holding a private citizen in contempt, an unprecedented action by this sham committee and their sham investigation. With that, I yield to my colleague from Florida, Mr. Gates. 2 minutes.
How much time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Why are we here on the floor of the House of Representatives listening to the Democrats and socialists and their Republican puppets reviewing Steve Bannon's podcast? Can't imagine that that would be the case if they actually had a bill, a reconciliation deal, legislation to help the American people. We're not here because of democracy. Save me the alligator tears on that. These are the folks who assaulted our democracy for 2 years under the specter of the Russia hoax. And it's sure not about violence, because they didn't seem to give a damn when our country was being engulfed in flames during the riots in the summer of 2020. It's not about congressional process. If it was about congressional process, Democrats would be doing what they have done in other cases. They would go to court. But the reason they haven't gone to court, like they did for Trump's taxes, in the Deutsche Bank subpoenas, in the Mazars matter, or in the Don McGahn matter, is because in each of those circumstances, they did not prevail in court. The courts realized that their subpoenas were overly broad. So instead of using the real process, here we are just enduring this politics. And because they can't build back better, they've just decided to build back meaner. I yield back.
Gentleman from Mississippi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just for the record, again, the gentleman from Indiana referenced the whistleblower. We have not talked to the whistleblower, but we've talked to the whistleblower's lawyer. And we're doing our work. So clearly, since he's quoting Politico, I want him to just get the record straight. Madam Speaker, I yield 2.5 minutes to a gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. Luria, who served 2 decades in the Navy and was among the first women to serve in the Navy's nuclear power program.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We reaffirmed that oath on January 3rd. Yet only 3 days later in this very chamber, this body was assaulted while carrying out the peaceful transfer of power, the very hallmark of our democracy. I first took that oath when I was 17 years old and entered the Naval Academy. I was willing to put my life on the line to serve my country and protect the foundation of this republic, a foundation that was shaken but not broken on January 6th. Mr. Bannon, a former naval officer like me, at one point understood this oath. He took it multiple times. He served his country honorably in the Navy. I don't know what happened between the time Lieutenant Bannon left the Navy and today. What forces corrupted his understanding of this oath? Mr. Bannon has been given the opportunity to voluntarily provide information relative to the work of our committee, but he's not complied. But truly, this is larger than Mr. Bannon, and this is larger than this investigation, and this is larger than the tragic and horrific events of January 6th. This vote is a test of that oath. To my colleagues who chose to vote against enforcing the subpoena, you're saying to all future men and women who are called before this body that they can ignore a subpoena from Congress without consequence. You can make that choice today, but that will be a vote to abdicate the power of the legislative branch in which you are elected to serve. That would be a vote to undermine the government and the Constitution which you took an oath to support and defend. The consequences of that vote won't be limited to this investigation and this subpoena alone. Your vote will do serious, long-lasting damage to Congress as an institution. And that, in turn, will do serious damage to our country, which we all love so dearly. We ask our young men and women in uniform to go forth every day and protect us, to protect this republic, to protect our form of government. I'm asking you to do the same, to protect our democracy from those forces to destroy it within. And I yield back the remainder of our time.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Indiana.
Madam Speaker, I yield as much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Look, we've seen the worst 10 months of any administration in history.
We went from a secure border to chaos. We went from safe streets to violent crime. We've seen stable prices turn into inflation and empty shelves. The respect around the world we had is now turned into the debacle that was the exit from Afghanistan. And we went from peace in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords to thousands of rockets being fired on our friend and ally Israel, not to mention energy independence, to now the spectacle of the President of the United States begging OPEC to increase production. But what scares me most is what this administration and Democrats are doing to freedom. Every right we enjoy under the First Amendment has been assaulted over the last year. Your right to practice your faith, still places today in the country where a full congregation can't meet on Sunday morning. Your right to petition your government, your right to assemble, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, every single one's been attacked. We just learned in the Judiciary Committee from the Attorney General. National School Boards Association on last month, September 29th, sends a letter to the President of the United States asking the FBI to get involved in local school board matters. 5 days later, the Attorney General issues a memo to do just that. First sentence of the memo says this. This is the Attorney General's memo. In recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats at school board meetings. We ask him a simple question. What's the evidence for that spike in threats? What's the data? What did you review? Guess what his answer was? His only evidence, the only thing he reviewed, was the letter from the School Board Association, from a political organization. And now they're going to target parents at school board meetings, and we have the January 6th committee issuing subpoena after subpoena. 11 of the people they've issued subpoenas to were names on an application asking the government for permission to hold the rally. Independent individuals exercising their First Amendment right to assemble asked the government for permission. The government granted them permission, and now these 20 and 30-year-olds whose name are on that application, they're going to be deposed by these guys for simply exercising their first. Here's what they're asking them. Here's what they ask them. We want to know who the selection of speakers, who the speakers were and how were they selected. We want to know any communications these people who put their names on a permit, got permission from the government. We want to know any member of Congress you talked to. Wow. Your right to petition your government? That's what they want to subpoena. That's why they're subpoenaing these people. This is scary where they want to go. I mean, these questions, coordination of speakers, discussions of content. This sounds like what the IRS did to people 10 years ago when they were asking 501c groups applying for tax-exempt status. Do you pray at the start of your meeting? I mean, first it's school boards, then it's people applying for a permit. We saw what they did to people, what the IRS did to people just a few years ago. Not to mention what else the committee's doing. Preservation letters to all the carriers, all the companies. Preserve every call, every email, every text. Think about that. Every call someone made to hundreds and hundreds, supposedly, according to news reports, they've done this for. Text to your spouse, calls to your mom. Preserve it all. And this is just what we know about. This is just what's been reported. I mean, now Steve Bannon. Mr. Bannon is a target of the investigation, because, quote, this is from the Select Committee's own report, quote, his efforts to plan political activity, that's the standard. You're involved in political activity, they're going to investigate you. We know what this is really about. This is about getting at President Trump. Tried to stop President Trump before he was even elected with the Russia investigation. Tried to remove President Trump from office twice. While he was in office, they tried to do that. And now they're trying to get him after the fact, after he's left. All because this guy cut taxes, reduced regulations, greatest economy in the history, the greatest economy in 50 years, lowest unemployment, all because he built the wall, got us out of the Iran deal, put the embassy in Jerusalem. When President Trump was president, Americans got their Christmas presents on time, but they're coming after him. The Reuters story said this. The FBI has found no evidence that President Trump or people directly around him were involved in organizing the violence. They don't care. The FBI has no evidence. Senate report said no evidence of a coordinated plan. They don't care. They're going to drag these 11 people into subpoenas, in for depositions with subpoenas, because they're so determined to get their political enemies.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Mississippi.
Yield back, thank you.
Madam Chair, the Vice Chair of the committee put in record the fact that the FBI and Department of Justice declared no such thing in terms of January 6th. So the assertion that somehow they've conducted an investigation is just not true. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Schiff, the distinguished chairman of the House Intelligence Committee.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we are here this afternoon to test a proposition as old as the country's founding. Are we a nation of laws? We are here because one man has decided that we are now only a nation of men, and that rich and powerful men need not follow the law. And the question we must confront is nothing less than this: is he right? Are some people now truly above the law, beholden to nothing and no one, free to ignore the law and without consequence? Congress is investigating the worst attack on our Capitol in over a century, made worse still by the fact it was carried out by our own people who had been misled to believe that their election had been stolen and that violence was now justified. People who are still being misled by a dangerous lie that may lead to even more bloodshed. This is not some theoretical matter. We were here. We heard the doors breaking, the glass shattering, the cries from outside the chamber, and we saw the bloody results, the officers injured and those who died. And in the wake of the horrors of that day, a day in which the Capitol Police put their lives on the line to defend our democracy, it falls on us to defend that same democracy, albeit at far less risk to ourselves. The founders intended that ambition should be made to check ambition. If we fail to uphold Congress's power to compel information, then we cease to be a co-equal branch of government, unable to perform our oversight or check any abuses of executive power. Take away a court's power to subpoena witnesses, and it fails to be a court. Take away the Congress's ability to do the same, and it fails to be a Congress, becoming instead a mere plaything for a corrupt executive. Do not believe for one moment that if we fail to hold Steve Bannon accountable, that he will be the exception. He will become the rule, not a rule of law, but the misrule of men. Either we are all equal before the law or none of us is. This is the essence of our democracy. And as Lincoln said, whatever differs from this, to the extent of the difference, is no democracy. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Wyoming.
Could I inquire as to how much time is remaining, Madam Speaker?
The gentlelady from Wyoming has 5.5 minutes. Gentleman from Mississippi has 2 minutes, and the gentleman from Indiana has no time remaining.
All right, I'm prepared to close then, Madam Speaker.
Gentlelady is recognized to close.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, just outside this chamber, over the north door in Statuary Hall, which was the old House chamber, stands a statue of Cleo, the muse of history. She's one of the oldest works of art in our capital. She stands in a winged chariot, the chariot of time, and she takes notes in her book, reminding all of us that our words and our actions will be judged by history. History particularly will judge those of us in positions of public trust for what we are doing today. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Madam Speaker, we all recognized how profoundly wrong January 6th was. My colleague from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, who just suggested that we were here because we opposed President Trump's policies, seems to have forgotten that actually on January 6th, he himself said, quote, "What happened today is wrong and is not what America is about." The next day, Mr. Jordan said, "What happened Wednesday is a tragedy. Everyone knows it's as wrong can be." And today, Madam Speaker, the former president suggested that the violence was justified. My colleagues in the Republican Party, the Republican members of this body, have to understand, have to recognize that there's a moment when politics must stop if we want to defend and protect our institutions. A violent assault on the Capitol to stop a constitutional process of counting electoral votes is that moment. They all knew that on that day. In fact, the minority leader himself stood in this chamber and said, quote, "The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding." Mr. McCarthy was right then. The president bears responsibility. We need to know what happened. This body must have the ability to understand what caused the attack, to understand who was responsible, and to take legislative action to ensure that it never happens again. Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this motion for contempt for Mr. Steve Bannon. I urge them to do so because it is right, it is morally right, it is constitutionally right, and it is all of our duty. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Mississippi.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Over the last hour, we've heard a lot about what we are not debating today. The Select Committee is charged with investigating a deadly attack on the seat of our democracy and making recommendations to ensure it never happens again. I can't think of anything more serious, but many of our colleagues would rather talk about anything else. I think I know why. I think they are performing for an audience of one. I do, however, want to commend my colleagues on the Select Committee for laying out clearly why the House must cite Mr. Bannon for contempt. If our investigation is to succeed, if the House's constitutional authority to investigate and legislate is to remain robust, then we cannot let this man flout the laws with impunity. The Select Committee is made up of people of character, of profound commitment to public service and our Constitution. They all elevate the committee's work. I especially want to thank and acknowledge our Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney, for her leadership and partnership. There's no doubt in my mind that history will record her courage in stark relief. History will record all of what we do here today. We can be on the right side or the wrong side. I urge all my colleagues to remember that as we cast this vote, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the previous question is ordered on the resolution. The question is on adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution
Madam
is
Speaker,
agreed to.
I
For
request
what
a recorded
purposes the
vote.
gentleman from Indiana rise?
Request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Georgia rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Jody Heiss from Georgia, I inform the House that Mr. Height will vote no on H.R. 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
As a member designated by Ms. Kirkpatrick, I inform the House Ms. Kirkpatrick will vote yes on HRES 730. And as a member designated by Mr. Huffman, I inform the House that Mr. Huffman will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Madam Speaker, as member designated by Congressmember Napolitano, I wish to inform the House that Congressmember Napolitano will vote yes on HRES 730.
Hang on one second. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Chair, as the member designated by the Honorable Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts, I inform the House that Mr. Lynch will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois rise?
As a member designated by Mr. Rush, I inform the House that Mr. Rush will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. DeFazio of Oregon, I inform the House Mr. DeFazio will vote yes on HRES 730. And as the member designated by Ms. Alma Adams of North Carolina, I inform the House that Ms. Adams will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Cooper, I inform the House that Mr. Cooper will vote yes on HRES 730. As the member designated by Ms. Frankel, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Mr. Khanna of California pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Mr. Khanna will vote aye on HRES 730.
Where's this guy from? For what purpose is the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Stewart of Utah, I inform the House that Mr. Stewart will vote nay on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Florida rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member designated by Ms. Salazar of the state of Florida, I inform the House that Ms. Salazar will vote nay on HRES 730.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Sylvia Garcia, I inform the House that Ms. Garcia will vote yes on HRES 730. And as the member designated by Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, I inform the House that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez will vote yes on HRES 730.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Tlaib, I inform the House that Ms. Tlaib will vote yes on House Res 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Mr. Lawson, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote yes on H Resolution 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mrs. Wasserman Schultz, I inform the House that Mrs. Wasserman Schultz will vote yea on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Alvio Series, I inform the House that Mr. Series will vote yes on HRES 730. And as the member designated by Mr. Donald Payne, I inform the House that Mr. Payne will vote yes on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
As the member designated by Congresswoman Grace Meng pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Congresswoman Meng will vote yea on HRES 730.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Connecticut rise?
As the member designated by Ms. Wilson, I inform the House that Ms. Wilson will vote yes on HRES 730.
Gentleman from Virginia rise.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin, I inform the House that Ms. Moore will vote yes on HRS 730.
What purpose is the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
Madam Speaker, as a member designated by Representative McMorris Rogers pursuant to House Res 8, I inform the House that Representative McMorris Rogers will vote no on H.Res. 730.
On this vote, the yeas are 229, the nays are 202. The resolution is adopted, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations from the well. We are preparing for 1 minute. Members, please take your conversations from the well. Thank you. The House will be in order. Members, please take your conversations from the well. The chair will now entertain requests for 1 minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Georgia seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today in support of the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act, which will be considered by the House later this week. As a working mother, I strongly support this bipartisan bill to provide reasonable accommodations to nursing mothers in the workplace. The Pump for Nursing Mothers Act, among other critical changes, would extend break time and space protections to workers who are currently excluded from overtime protections, including teachers, transportation workers, and agricultural workers. I was proud to work as a part of the bipartisan group, along with the bill's sponsor, Rep. Carolyn Maloney, to offer an amendment which maintains the undue hardship exemption threshold at its current level of 50 employees. The Pump for Nursing Mothers Act is supported by a broad coalition of stakeholders, including the National Retail Federation, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Education Association, and the American Civil Liberties Union. I enthusiastically support this bill and urge all members to do the same when it comes before the House this week.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to encourage my colleagues to join me in opposition to the proposed IRS reporting plan that would intrude on the bank accounts of Americans and impose new regulations on our already over-regulated banking system. First, it is not apparent that the IRS has any constitutional authority to monitor Americans in this way. Second, the American public does not support the expansion of IRS bank data collection. Recent polling shows bipartisan opposition, with 67% of those polled opposed to the IRS collecting bank deposit and withdrawal information. Finally, this would add another regulatory burden to our financial institutions after a historic year when banks and credit unions provided lifelines to families, businesses, and communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. This proposal imposes upon our right to privacy and is bad for families, small businesses, and financial institutions. I hope my colleagues across the aisle will reconsider their support for this unwarranted expansion of government. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Hawaii seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mahalo, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for far too long, America's broken for-profit healthcare system has left millions of Americans uninsured or underinsured. While out-of-pocket costs and corporate profits continue to rise, 8 million Americans have turned to a new form of health insurance, online fundraisers like GoFundMe to pay their medical bills. My nephew, Sean Day, was one of them. He passed away from cancer earlier this month at just 22 years of age. Mr. Speaker, we live in the richest country in the world. No one should be priced out of the health care that they need or delay seeing a doctor just because they can't afford it. No one should be forced to ask strangers online to crowdsource their medical bills. It is simply not right. This is why we must pass the Build Back Better Act. The Build Back Better Act will invest in our community's health care and expand medical coverage for our kupuna and lower prescription drug prices. It will save lives. During the deadliest pandemic in U.S. history, we must deliver the care America's families deserve. We must leave no one behind. Mahalo, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Seek unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute, revise extended remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. The Biden's proposed surveillance scheme is an ill-advised power grab which is turning trusted local financial institutions into IRS reporting agents, infringing upon the privacy of everyday Americans. The IRS already knows how much you earn. Now they want to know exactly how you spend it. This is a total breach of personal financial privacy with a presumption of guilt that I'm not okay with. How can we expect our citizens to place trust in their government when their government is keeping tabs on their every single transaction? A lot of people are wondering, how do people come to Congress and become millionaires while they're serving in Congress? It's just another push by the government to exercise control over our everyday lives. It's also a disincentive for people to save and keep money in banks and credit unions because they don't want to have every single thing tracked. They want to have our savings kept in coffee cans or in mattresses. That's a pretty bad way to go. So whether it's a $600 per transaction or up to $10,000 per year cumulative, it's an invasion of privacy, and we don't need another 80,000 IRS agents tracking us when we have a border that's like a sieve and other problems of much greater magnitude than what you or I are saving or spending our personal wealth on. It's a wrong-headed policy. The Biden administration and this House needs to take back such ideas. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor a woman of many firsts, an upstanding member of our community and someone I'm blessed to call a constituent. Her name is Dr. Renee F. Washington Gardner. She is the longest-serving female pastor of the Harlem Memorial Baptist Church in its entire history, dedicating decades of her life in service to church, her community, and God. And this past Sunday marked her 17th year of service, the first woman to also be named a moderator of the United Missionary Baptist Association in the group's 60 years history. Pastor Gardner is no stranger to shattering glass ceiling and paving the way for the next generation of cleric leaders. Under her guidance and guiding principle of unity, hope, and grace, Memorial Baptist Church has proven vital to the strength and resiliency of Harlem, and we're forever indebted. With Pastor Gardner at the helm, I trust that this work is only the beginning, and the Memorial Baptist Church will continue their mission of uplifting our community's most vulnerable and ingraining the spirit of strength in the fabric of our neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I rise to recognize Albert Edward Pelham, a beloved community leader and student advocate from my town, Montclair, New Jersey. Al was known for bringing people together. His work aided and inspired generations of Montclairians, and he leaves behind a beautiful legacy. Al was raised in Montclair and graduated from Montclair High School. He served our country in the U.S. Army before returning to New Jersey and graduating from Bloomfield College. From his leadership in the Montclair NAACP, the Montclair Neighborhood Development Corporation, the statewide Parent Advocacy Network, Montclair African American Heritage Foundation, and more, he dedicated himself to making his community a better and fairer place. One of Al's many achievements was the creation of Project Oasis, which offers year-round educational and recreational opportunities for students. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, Al adapted the program and organized a remote learning space so that all students had access to a computer to attend their virtual classes. He also created a program for students who were suspended to provide them with academic training and counseling as an alternative to staying at home. Al worked to ensure that all students, regardless of their background, had opportunities to excel. Al fought tirelessly for racial justice and inclusivity, guiding both the Montclair NAACP and the Montclair African Heritage Foundation through especially difficult times in our country. In 2019, he was recognized for these efforts with the Essex County Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award. Al's dedication to his community was matched by his deep commitment to his family. Al took any opportunity he could to be with his wife Audrey, his children Dwayne and Rhonda, his grandchildren Charles and Cameron, his sisters, and extended family. On August 19, 2021, Al passed away after a battle with cancer. His selfless commitment to making Montclair a better place will not soon be forgotten. I was honored to have known Al and to have called him my friend. The counsel he gave me and so many others over the years will continue to impact us and the entire Montclair community for generations to come. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Chairman, to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to be able to further defend and add to my statement regarding the Resolution 730, recommend that the House of Representatives find Stephen K. Bannon in contempt of Congress. It is well known that even from his own words and published reports, these are the words that Mr. Bannon told his listeners. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen. Okay, it's going to be quite extraordinarily different. All I can say is strap in. You made this happen, and tomorrow it's game day. So strap in. Let's get ready. So many people said, man, if I was in a revolution, I would be in Washington. Well, this is your time in history. There is no constitutional provision that would deny the January 6th committee the right to receive information after he has been subpoenaed from Mr. Bannon for information regarding the insurrection, the riot, the attack on January 6th. The idea of executive privilege is exerted by the existing president, limited on a president of the United States no longer in office, and in fact, Mr. Bannon has been gone from the White House since 2017. He has no legitimate basis. This is based on 3 equal branches of government. We cannot allow an individual to undermine democracy. This is a democratic republic, and I expect that the referral to the United States Department of Justice will be handled. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the gentlewoman from New Mexico, Ms. Leja Fernandez, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the subject of my special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are here today to talk about the importance of this historic moment indeed. This historic moment of where we will be investing in our children, investing in our planet, investing in our future. We are talking about the Build Back Better agenda. I want to begin by talking about my district, which is made up of beautifully diverse rural communities. My district is the size of Pennsylvania, but my communities in this district are rich in culture and rich in love. But you know what? They've also been historically left behind with little investments made to improve their lives and to allow them to thrive. New Mexican values are rooted in caring for each other. We know that we invest in what we care about. We know we invest in what we believe in. Well, we must invest in addressing the climate crisis because in my district, we know that agua es vida, water is life. Our farmers and ranchers are depending on us to act and preserve their water resources. Communities along our rivers, along our acequias, need us to pass a Build Back Better plan that tackles the crisis head-on so that we can preserve the water flowing from our mountains and cascading along our streams for decades to come to feed our ranchers, to feed our farmers, to quench our thirst. In these same communities, people often come back home to care for their loved ones, their parents and grandparents. I've heard their stories. We ask them, why did you come back? It's because there was nobody else available to care for my grandmother. There was nobody else to care for my tia. And we know that that care is a full-time job on its own. So what does it take to go to work in rural America? It's more than just roads and bridges. It's comprehensive paid family and medical care. It's investments in long-term care and affordable child care. In my state, 53% of people live in a child care desert. 71% of rural families live in areas without enough licensed child care providers. We can change that. The Build Back Better plan must invest in our rural communities. It will invest in our rural communities. We are talking about this plan empowering our rural regions, including our tribal nations, with the resources they know to grow their economies. Expanding access to affordable health care, lowering prescription drug prices, and making housing affordable. We can do this for our communities now. Ahora, now we can make this happen. We made progress with the American Rescue Plan, but we cannot stop there. We must build back better. And it's not enough to go back where we were because we know that where we were wasn't good enough. So we need to make sure that the child tax credit does not run out. We cannot kick our children who came out of poverty. 50% of the children in poverty in my state came out, and I'm not willing to tell them, I'm sorry, the clock struck 12 and you must go back into living in poverty. No, we must include an expansion and extension of the child tax credit in the Build Back Better Act. You know, those children who were living in poverty are coming out. We also need to make sure that those children in rural America get the early